Good morning, everyone. Welcome to Let's Talk Science. I don't have my name tag on, but I'm Jack Carr and co-chair with Andy Gordon of the Let's Talk Science Committee. Today we are privileged to have a member of our own community giving a talk. Dr. Jocelyn Miller is with us today, and she's originally from Northwest England, where she graduated from Imperial College in London University with honors in zoology, specializing in entomology. She then worked in the Center for World Locust Control in London. Josie married an Imperial College fellow student, and in 1966 they came to the U.S., intending to stay for only 2 years, but, well, obviously that plan got changed in the meantime, and they stayed on, and obviously she now enjoys dual citizenship and says all her children were born here in the U.S. In order to rebuild her career here in the U.S., she got a master's degree and a PhD from the University of Washington School of Forestry, where she also worked as a staff research assistant. She then left the UW to form her own consulting company, designing field trials, but returned to the UW to manage university intellectual properties for outside licensing, and eventually retired from that position. Aside from her interest in bugs, she is a passionate art lover, theater goer, gardener, temporal ball stitcher, which I understand is a Japanese quilted or crocheted or something, embroidered ball. Unfortunately, we don't have one, but and she is an avid reader. So please welcome fellow HH resident, Horizon House resident, and fellow member of the Let's Talk Science Committee, Dr. Jocelyn Miller.
Can you hear me? I volunteered for this, to give this talk today because we were looking for live speakers, and I'm live. Also, it gives me an opportunity to talk about insects, which have interested me since my teen years and are the core of my professional career. And this, I've put up this painting. It is a painting, it's not a photograph, just to show you that insects have all sorts of things. This is a butterfly, and it has these huge wings, two pairs of wings, and I wanted you to be able to gaze at the lovely colors and designs as I give my talk. The other reason why I volunteered was I wanted to persuade you all to stop using the word bug to describe all these interesting animals that I'm going to introduce you to. But there'll be more on that later, on the word bug. I, like you, loathe their presence in my closet. And you're looking now at a clothes moth. Moths chewing away at your favorite cashmere sweater. And wasps joining your outdoor summer picnics. And insects infesting all your indoor potted plants. But this is nothing, absolutely nothing, when you look at the big picture, the big insect picture. Insects' massive role in life on Earth. And today, I'm going to give you a tiny glimpse, a very tiny glimpse of that big picture. This talk is about insects in general. It's not Insects 101. It is to tell you their life story as much or as well as we know it today. I want you to be aware of the mighty job these tiny and sometimes pesky creatures play in our lives. The story is a long, long and important one in the evolution of our world, where we humans and all the different insects live together. According to all the up-to-date scientific techniques that we have at hand, insects first emerged or were recorded historically, and notice I'm not saying originated. This emergence on Earth occurred about 480 million years ago, about when plants appeared, land plants that is. They arrived together way before the dinosaurs. They came out of the water, they left the oceans and the seas for the land, and they were terrestrial. That is, land-bound. They crawled, they wriggled, they hopped, they jumped, and they walked. And this was, geologically speaking, Ordovician times. And later, in Devonian times, 300 to 350 million years ago, that's 30 million years after they landed on Earth, they developed wings. And this allowed them to become airborne, the first animals to do so. Do not imagine that this happened overnight. This was a very, very slow, but steady evolutionary process. To this day, they are still the only invertebrates with wings. And that's in their adult form. The insect gets the wings when they're in their adult form, and we'll learn more about that later. Over time, they came to fly long distances, further and further, over any sort of terrain, water, mountains, desert, and colonize new habitats far and wide, north and south. Nothing was out of reach. They could pick and choose where they went and where they stayed. Today, there are insects that do not have wings and therefore cannot fly. This has happened as all the species evolved wings. Some were lost, some never needed them, and never had them. It's all a matter of what works best, survives, and gets better. Survival of the fittest in that time and that space. This one that's up at the moment is a picture of a desert locust, and I put it up to show you how you can have drab colors in insects, and this is sort of drab in order to match the desert surroundings. But the thing I'm drawing your attention to on this particular picture is that it has very long, powerful wings and very powerful jumping legs. You can see that third leg on the side. It's got 6 legs altogether, 3 pairs. But that 6th pair is huge. Now, humans, in order to make sense of all of these different living animals and plants around them, grouped like things together, and then in the 1700s, they got serious about this grouping. And naming them, naming the groups. And this And so classification of plants and animals was born. And one man led the job. This was Carolinus Linnaeus, and he was born in 1707. He was a Swedish biologist, physician, and teacher, and he formalized this bionomial nomenclature, the modern system of naming organisms and grouping them together. He began this in the 18th century by formally introducing names, and then a formalized grouping of like with like grouping. So we have classes, orders, genus, species, and variety coming down in that order. And insects are an order. The whole mass of insects is an order, and they belong to the invertebrates. So, order Insecta. Again, this Latin name came from Linnaeus. He learned and he spoke Latin as a small boy from his father. And he was called Carolinus Linnaeus, and this was shortened to Carl. But he is mostly known worldwide as just Linnaeus. And he formalized the modern system of naming organisms, bionomial nomenclature. That is, each species name, that's each insect, has two descriptors: the genus, the first name, main grouping, and the species, specific, the second name. So, bumblebee, which we've got up on the screen now, and bumblebee is the common name. Its scientific name is Bombus terrestris. Bombus with a capital B being the first word, and terrestris the lower case. And I think it means a big bum-like insect. There are 20,000 species of bees, so this is just one. Then within the species, further differences define varieties, and there are all sorts of varieties of bees, honeybees, etc., etc. This classification system introduced law and order. It's a formalized system of grouping and naming to the ever-growing chaos among multiplying organisms. And today, there are 10 quintillion insects on the globe. 1 million have been named. 4 million are uncategorized. All insects belong to the phylum Arthropoda, but unlike other arthropoda, lobsters, spiders, millipedes, they have a body design which is all their own, specific to insects, specific to them. And this is how we identify them. And you've got a picture up there, a diagram of a generalized insect. And you'll see that it has a 3-part segmented body: a head, a thorax, and an abdomen. And all of these 3 parts are encased within an exoskeleton. That's a skeleton outside of the body, like a suit of armor. 3 pairs of jointed legs are attached to this thorax, and you can see these on the picture that's up now. 3 pairs of legs. The 3rd pair are somewhat hidden by the wings, but 3 pairs. 1 or 2 pairs are also attached to the thorax. And you can see those wings on this. This is a diagram is based, I think, on a fly, or maybe a bee. But you can see where the wings are attached. It has 3 pairs of jointed legs, and these legs are not always the same size that they are in this diagram. 1 or 2 pairs of wings are also attached to the thorax, and here it looks like, well, no, it looks like just 1 pair. And a pair of antennae, which in this case are very small. They're coming up between the eyes, and they're small, but they can be very long on insects, are also situated on the head, as are the mouth parts. Also, now can you go back to the diagram? Also situated on the head are 2 compound eyes, and you can see those. They're those sitting right above the thorax. And these eyes are made up of repeating optical units, each of which, the optical units, has its own lens. Compound eyes provide an insect with an exceptionally wide field of view, with each 100 to 1,000 tiny lenses creating an individual image. And the insect brain puts all the images together to achieve a peripheral vision without moving either its eyes or its head. And I'm sure you've all experienced trying to swat that fly in your room and failing repeatedly. This is because the insect, with its compound eyes, sees your moves before, it's as though they see your move before you make it. You can't win. This basic identifying body design, remember, the head, the thorax, the abdomen, and all the attached parts, are all based on the insect's creation and descent from a common ancestor. They're all inherited from that common ancestor. And this allows for all the different insects we see today: the beetles, the butterflies, the ants, the flies, and the termites, and locusts. And there are many, many more. I'm sure you can all think of them many more. They all look totally different, but they all have these precise body parts. And that's how you identify them. They all look and appear different, but they have the same basic 3-part body design, which makes them easy to identify: insects. Their huge numbers and infinitely varied design, shapes and colors, and their overall size have evolved over millions of years that they've been on Earth, but it never strays from that basic design inherited from the original common ancestor all those years ago. But what is not common to all insects is their various lifestyles. That's the lifestyle that occurs from the egg, the laying of the egg, to the adult. And I thought I could list this for you, considering the simplest to the most complex. And that's not so. There's nothing simple in insects, except for their basic body design. Everything else is complicated, ancestral, and the key to their identity. Now, let the word let's look at the word bug. Let's sort that out here now, because this word bug annoys me. And you hear people refer to the bugs as though they're referring to all insects or all small, tiny animals that run around. We often use the word bug to mean any small creature with legs that may include other animals that are not insects, such as spiders, centipedes, and millipedes. But a bug is an insect with all the right body parts, but all insects are not bugs. To be correctly named a bug, you have to have mouth parts that are designed to suck. Now remember that, everybody. For instance, just to name a few, spittlebugs, aphids, bedbugs, mosquitoes. Think of it like man using a straw. And these sucking mouth parts may also pierce. Think of it like this. Bugs are insects, but not all insects are bugs. And use the name where it's rightfully due. So that you can understand the importance of insects in the world today, I'm going to tell you two related stories which are close to home for all of us here in Washington State. They are both to do with fruit growing in eastern Washington. Washington State is one of the top apple producing states in the USA due to the rich volcanic soil and the abundant sunshine. 60% of US apples come from here, like Red Delicious, Cosmic Crisp, Fuji, Gala, Golden Delicious, Honeycrisp. Every time you go in the supermarket, there's another apple there. Fruit growing began in a small way here on land belonging to mom-and-pop farms, and it included various fruit, apples, nectarines, peaches, cherries. And when I first came to Seattle, the main apple was Red Delicious. There was a big market for these big, shiny, soft red apples, particularly in the Asian market. But as other varieties with different characteristics were added, the number of orchards grew, both in size and numbers of trees. And in a desire to get more apples off any one tree, that is an apple from every flower in the flower cluster, in order to make this happen, you have to get pollen to each of the flower pistils or stigma. And you have to fertilize all the flowers. You have to spread that pollen everywhere. So what did the orchard people do to do this? They decided they'd shake the trees to spread the pollen. That would do it. And they tried blowing the trees. That would do it. It didn't. The trees all to no avail. No bigger crop. No more better apples than if they left it to Mother Nature and her insects. But it was then realized that if you could increase the number of insects and get them there early, you would increase fertilization, more spreading of the pollen. So what happened next was that they turned all the land in and around their orchards, or their land where they were growing fruit trees, into native flower land. Wild flowers of all kinds all year round. And that meant more insects all year round. This worked, And the next thing they did was to have beehive owners bring their hives into the orchards during the tree flowering season. More bees, more insects, more pollination. The result, increased fertilization of the flowers, more apples, better business. And because of all this success, orchards have grown, and there are fewer mom and pop apple orchards now. It's become big fruit business. Now, my second story is sort of related to the first one. It's beehives. Beehives is another insect story. And this one is a cooperative venture between man and honeybee. Man builds the palace, and queen bee takes up residence, and all the workers and males get busy doing what they should be doing, manning the hive and making honey. Now, bees make honey with truly unique flavor profiles from the specific plants they feed on. So you've got heather, clover, wildflower, acacia, blackberry, sage, and these are just a few. And that's why hive owners move their hives around, including to the orchards for the wildflowers and the fruit tree flowers, and it's a win-win situation for all involved. And finally, I would like to finish with a very personal insect encounter, just to show you what else they can all do. In 1972, my husband and I bought a second house, or bought our second house, in the USA. This house was built in 1960 on a quarter-acre lot of old farmland. The site was bordered to the west by a very steep ravine running down to Lake Washington and owned by the city of Mercer Island. The ravine was historic. It was historic to Mercer Island, undisturbed, and filled with old-growth forest, western red cedar, Doug fir, hemlock, and intermixed with all sorts of various deciduous trees, and the understory growth was extraordinarily dense and varied. About 14 years after we moved into this house, in part of the siding trim of the carport roof was damaged, and we had to repair it. And in doing that, to our horror, and particularly my horror, we discovered carpenter ant tunnels and intermittent secondary nests running into the house. This particular picture that's up now is a carpenter ant. It doesn't have wings because it only has wings in the adult phase when it's laying eggs, when it's mating. The pesticide company we brought in further discovered that they were coming in both from the front and the back of the house. They were fully resident, sharing our home with us. Now, carpenter ants do not eat wood. They just saw their way through it. As their name says, they're carpenters. And they just saw their way through and tunnel for others to follow. They are the most commonly encountered wood-destroying insect in the Pacific Northwest. We had the house fumigated and then kept them at bay for years. In fact, we kept them at bay, until I sold the house when I moved here 3 years ago. I don't know how the carpenter ants are doing nowadays there. But, carpenter ants are the front runners sent by Mother Nature to prepare and start the process and decay and composting of dead wood, managing and keeping old forest land understory in order so that it doesn't build up. Without insects like this, man would be buried in our debris. These carpenter ants were simply doing their job. And I think, looking back, that they had probably been in the house since soon after it was built in 1960. We humans were the interlopers. The house that was built was just more dead wood on the forest land they managed. And perhaps the answer or the solution is, do not build your wooden house in such situations. Perhaps brick or stone would be better. And secondly, do not build or trespass so close to firmly established old-growth forest land, which is sure to have millions of carpenter ants in there. I haven't been back to look or inquire whether the ants have returned. The wood that ants mostly, their preference, if they're choosing, if they've got choices, is nice, damp, dead wood. But all other kinds of dead wood appeal to them, obviously. This house did, and that was not old, dead, moist wood. So that's my house story and my last insect story. And later this month, on February 21st, Let's Talk Science is bringing you a beautiful nature film, My Garden of 1,000 Bees. And this is a perfect follow-up to my talk today. It was filmed by a wildlife photographer who was imprisoned in his house and garden during the COVID pandemic. This is one of the wonderful things that came out of the COVID pandemic. He spent the whole time filming the bees that visited his garden and what they were doing. And so you see the bees coming and going deep into the flowers. It's just magical. So don't miss it. And that's the end. But I hope I've aroused questions or comments from some of you.
Josie, in the evolutionary attempt at survival, are the bugs going to win?
Sorry, can you repeat your question?
I say, okay, there's an evolutionary struggle for survival, every
Yes.
species.
Yes.
Are the bugs going to win that survival? I'm going to use bugs. I'm taking a chance here. I know
What
that.
do you mean? Do you mean
Are they
win?
going to survive and the rest of us are going to be gone?
Oh, they very probably could. I would put my odds if I was betting on it, on the insects.
Yes.
Oh, hi. You gave me liberty to tell a personal story. Thank you, Josie. This is Peter over here. Yeah. My dad was a high school science teacher, and he had this theory, or maybe it was knowledge, I never knew whether it was confirmed, that the way to get around the peripheral vision of a housefly was to come up at it from behind, because he believed or knew they took off backwards. And he was very good at it, and at age 7 or 8, I was not capable. Dad was also a humanitarian, and I guess in this case, an insectitarian. He never killed it if there was an opportunity to open a window and put it outside.
Oh, high level.
And off it went. So, Dad, a memory of you.
But remember what I said, Peter. I said the insect eyes are big sort of balls on the head, and they've got huge peripheral vision.
Yeah.
So, it doesn't matter where you're standing, whether you're in front of it or behind
Yeah.
it. There's no such thing in an insect as in front of it or behind it.
Well, in terms of the direction of flight, as my dad understood it,
Oh.
they go backwards when they're taking off. So right into his open palm, which he then closed, and
He thought they fly backwards.
that's what he believed, and he demonstrated by being successful in catching them.
Well, they don't fly backwards.
Sorry to hear that. I should never have mentioned the story.
I bet they can fly backwards, but their first move is to fly in the strongest direction, and that's forwards. Their body's built for that, the head, the feelers which feel everything. It's meant to go forwards if it's really serious about going.
Okay, I had heard that too, that they first have to jump before they can fly, and that they jumped backwards. I don't know. But my father had the same intent to catch the fly and release it. And he taught me to come from all sides at once. So you can do that with both hands. And I found it also works if you come down with a glass straight down on the fly or whatever you're trying to catch. And it can see you, but it doesn't know what to do. And so it just sits there until the glass is all the way down around it, or you have your hands ready to catch it. And then you slide some paper under the glass and carry it outside, and that's what I do. Spiders also.
Well, a spider isn't going to fly away from you.
This is an amazing collection of fly catchers here. Anyone else got a technique they would? Do you want to? Oh, no? All right.
The one thing not to use is a spray can.
A what?
A spray can of fly killer. Because you're doing more harm to yourself than the fly.
Other questions about other insects? Yes. Coming there. Hi, Audrey.
There was a story in the Seattle Times within the last, either this morning or yesterday, about finding very rare African insects being imported and were picked up. Is that common, and what's the danger?
Well, and I read that article too. They didn't. I don't think they actually named the insects, did they? No, they didn't. I think that was insect collecting, like the collecting of ivory from elephants. They're not collecting the elephant. They're collecting the ivory. And with insects, could you put me up? Let's try 7. Oh, there. No, that one. That one. This is 2 beetles, and you'll see the beetle. Well, no, it's 1 beetle. The beetle on the left, and the color isn't looking quite as good on the screen as it is on mine. But beetles have beautiful exos. Their outer body. This is part of their wings and their thorax, are gorgeously coloured. And they're used in all sorts of things. So they're valuable. It's like the elephant's ivory tusks. And butterflies, all those gorgeous colours and patterns in butterflies are extraordinarily sought after and valuable. I think that's where they were going. I was surprised that it seemed to be a surprise to the people who discovered them, because I think this has been going on forever.
Do mosquitoes have any redeeming features?
Yes, they're food for an awful lot of other creatures.
Yes, and I haven't mentioned, thank you for reminding me, I meant to mention that insects are incredibly important in the world food chain. You know, they don't just get buried or rot in the ground. They form a huge, huge food supply in the food chain. Thank you for reminding me. I totally forgot that one. Now, what was your question? About where the mosquitoes.
Could you please speak into the mic? We can't hear a word you're saying over there.
Did you not hear that last answer?
I didn't hear what you said.
That insects in general are a huge gift to the food circle in the world. All sorts of things depend totally on insects for their food. And I'm not talking about just insects dropping in massive dead piles, but just every insect when it dies is food for somebody. You know, locusts in the jungles are when the fires break out in the jungle, the locusts and grasshoppers get caught, and that's a barbecued insect. As to mosquitoes doing any good, you're thinking about the spread of malaria, right? Oh, and biting you. Oh, well, that's minor.
Okay.
They're just feeding on you. The spread of disease, of course, has become as a sort of incidental aside for the mosquito, that is. I mean, it's not trying to spread disease, it's trying to feed.
Another question?
Though in that picture of the butterfly, it looks, are those veins in the wings, or are they like skeletons, bones? Is there circulation going on?
That's an interesting question. They're more support for the whole wing.
Okay.
Think about butterfly wings. They have, compared to their body, and you can see that the reason I've got this peculiar slide up is so that you can see the actual insect between the two pairs of wings. This is two pairs of wings. And the insect is very small and uninteresting. But I think their support for they're like the skeleton of the rest of the body. Their support, they're the veins of the wings, but I'm not sure about what flows amongst them. I'll look that up for you.
I was just glad to hear about the usefulness of carpenter ants, that they take care of the dead wood in the forest, because on Bainbridge Island, I crawl around under our house every once in a while, making sure that I was killing all the carpenter ants that were eating the foundations of the house. It was glad to hear they had a use.
Oh,
Thank you.
my goodness, without them, they are the forerunners for all the other things that come
Isn't
after
that
you.
amazing?
They're the things that, when I was talking about the ravine that we lived alongside on Mercer Island, it was a very steep ravine, but it was never out of order. And nobody came in there and managed it. It belonged to the city, and you couldn't go in there and manage it. Lots of people tried, they'd send their arborist in to trim a little here and there. And I would rush out and call the city and say, there's somebody hacking away in the ravine. But if we didn't have things like carpenter ants and all the other insects and things, small things, the forest floor would just build up and build up and build up. And there wouldn't be a forest. It needs that. It needs something to get it started. And the carpenter ant is the one who does that. And, in the case of our house, which was originally built by the builder who built it and lived in it, it was just across an unfinished road from this deep ravine. And I think probably the carpenter ants were already looking around on the farmland that it was originally, because, this was land and there was stuff there and they were rooting around. They move around at night, and crossing this little unfinished road was no trouble at all to them. They could just, over we go. The fumigators that we had felt sure that there was a big major nest somewhere on our land, and I said, no, there isn't. I mean, I would have known. I mean, I gardened every inch of my garden, but there certainly could have been huge nests down in this ravine. And there could have been it on other parts of the land that I just didn't know about and that other people wouldn't recognize. But there always is a huge nest. And then there are the tunnels and these intermediary nests around. Did you control yours in your basement?
Well, it was not a basement, really. It was just, there was not, you could just crawl space under the house. Yeah.
Was the basement concrete?
Oh, no, it was wooden. Well, no, just the outward structure was concrete, but no, inside was.
So there was wood down there?
Yeah, a lot of wood down there, yeah. Which they enjoyed, yeah.
You have a beautiful picture of a ladybug that is obviously adored by all of us. But I understand there's also the Japanese well, if we see ladybug, we protect it. We do everything to keep it alive. But the Japanese ladybug apparently is, excuse me, it's orange with black dots, and it's destructive to trees, to whatever. Is that
sure?
true? And should we
sure?
kill it?
You're sure that it was destructive to trees? Because the ones we see around here are not. They're just eating other insects.
Oh, well,
They're feeding on other things, not just insects. But
So-
things smaller than them. I mean, they're fairly small to start with. Ladybugs.
No, the orange ones, not the red ones. The red ones are great.
Well,
But
there's
there
all
are-
sorts of shades of orange and red in ladybugs. There's loads of them. They're all different varieties.
So they're not from Japan?
Oh, they could be. Yes, they could be. Yes. Yeah.
You used to be able to buy them if you had aphids eating your garden.
That's
You'd
right.
buy ladybugs
Yes,
to
you could.
come in and eat the aphids. So they were beneficial. They
Yes,
were always
yes.
considered beneficial.
You just liberate them in your
Yeah.
garden or wherever your
Yeah.
problem is. Now, some people wouldn't want ladybugs even though they're not in their house, but I don't know.
I worked at a university that had a variety of buildings. And one of the lowest buildings and the worst shape was where my office was. And one day I was leaning against the wall and I felt movement. And I looked closer and there were little veins running back and forth under my hand, under the wood. And I've forgotten the name of them, but they were sort of like carpenter ants, except that they were in the wood.
Carpenter ants are quite big.
No, these were termites, I think. Yeah. Anyway, the university got so frustrated, I guess, that they demolished the building. And we got into a brand new building.
They could have just left it to the whatever the insects were.
Josie, you say that the carpenter ants don't actually eat the wood.
No.
What is their diet?
Other small insects, other
Into the mic.
other whatever they can feed, but it's not wood. It's leaves and any detritus. Does that not explain it to you? No. They're eating like what the ladybugs are eating.
So they're omnivores?
They eat anything?
Yes. Yeah, you mean by omnivores, you mean anything? Yeah.
There was an old
That
lady
they like.
who swallowed a fly. I don't know why she swallowed a fly.
If there are no more-
Do you know why she swallowed a fly?
If you have no more questions, I've got an interesting aside to my story about our carpenter ants. Where the ravine came down and into Lake Washington, that originally down there at the water's edge was where the original ferryman's house was. You know, there was a ferry to Mercer Island before there was a road over it. And so there was a ferryman, and he built this house was built for him, and the ferry came in there. And I'm sure it was because the land, you know, hit the lake at a nice angle. And the house he built, the house that was built for the ferryman had what we always called a tin roof. It had a metal roof. Now, I don't know about the rest of the house, but it was just down below us where the ravine, just to the right of where the ravine ran into the lake. So, you know, when we had this invasion in our house, I thought, geez, they must have known something when they put that tin roof up there. Because, you know, carpenter ants can't eat through your tin roof. Well,
One more question. What do you know about the move to use insects as food for people?
can you just repeat that? The word.
Yes. What do you know about the move to use insects as food for people?
Well, I thought we were already eating insects.
As an industry producing insects.
Oh,
For food.
you mean the grinding up of insects into a flour? Is that what you?
And encouraging people to eat insects.
Encouraging people to eat insects.
So,
Any kind, any way.
so, is your question is this a move afoot, or is this going to be a business?
There seems to be more interest expressed in
Ah.
literature and
Well, I think there
news.
probably is, because the the outer skeleton of insects, particularly big, bold insects, say like locusts and grasshoppers, that is very nutritious. That's why in the jungles it was a staple food for natives. Man's just interfered with all of this because it's made out that insects are undesirable in all facets, whereas what the message I've tried to give you today is that that's untrue. They're only a pain in the neck to us because we have a lifestyle that allows them to be a pain in the neck to us. And maybe that's not fair either. But they run an essential part, if not the most essential part, of human life on Earth.
I think that's an appropriate ending point. Insects are our best friends. Take one to lunch today. Thank you, John. Thank you very much.